It was a quiet morning in September. The sky was soft with fog, and the trees were still. The air felt calm, almost sacred. Near a small stream, Amara knelt down in the mud. In her hands, she held something so small, so fragile, it barely moved. A puppy. Thin, dirty, shaking all over. He looked like he hadn't eaten in days. His eyes were wide and empty, like he had stopped expecting anything good. Amara had found him earlier that day, lying alone by the dusty road outside the sanctuary. No collar, no sign of where he came from, just a tiny life, forgotten. She gave him water, cleaned his paws, and wrapped him in a blanket. Then she placed him in a wooden pen near the elephant area, and that's when it happened. A sound in the distance, slow, heavy, soft but strong, like the earth itself was moving. Amara looked up. Across the clearing, the biggest elephant in the sanctuary was walking toward her. His name was Buna. He was old, gentle, but sad. Everyone at the sanctuary knew him. He had lost his herd many years ago, and since then he barely connected with anyone. He kept to himself, always quiet, always alone. But now, Buna was walking, toward her, toward the puppy. Amara held her breath as the elephant got closer. Buna stopped right in front of the blanket. He didn't move. The puppy didn't bark or run. He just looked up at the giant above him, and for a few seconds, nothing else existed. No wind, no birds, no sound. Just a small broken puppy and a silent, grieving elephant, staring at each other like they had known pain in the same way. Buna slowly lowered his head. He didn't touch the puppy. He didn't have to. The puppy curled tighter into the blanket, let out a soft sigh, and closed his eyes. Buna stood still. Then, quietly, he walked away. But he didn't go far. He stopped under a tall tree near the pen and stayed there, watching, waiting. He didn't leave that spot for the rest of the day. The staff didn't know what to make of it. Buna had never done that before, never shown interest in anything. But Amara had seen something different in his eyes, something gentle, something sad, something starting to wake up. That night, as the sun went down, the puppy slept deeply for the first time in who knows how long, and Buna was still there, still watching, still staying close, as if, without saying a word, he had chosen to protect him. No one knew why, but something had begun, something real, something rare. Have you ever seen a bond this powerful between two completely different animals? Tell us in the comments, and let us know where in the world you're watching from. The next morning, Amara opened the gate quietly, unsure of what she'd find. She didn't expect Buna to still be there, but he was, exactly where she had left him, under the same tree, standing still, facing the wooden pen where the puppy lay sleeping. His eyes never moved. His body didn't shift. It was as if he had kept watch all night long. The puppy, now named Coda, stretched slowly in the blanket. He looked better, still weak, but breathing more calmly. Buna took one step closer. Amara stayed still. The last thing she wanted was to interrupt whatever was happening between them. Buna stopped again, just a few feet away from the pen. He didn't reach out. He didn't make a sound. But he was there. And somehow, that was enough. From that moment on, the pattern began. Every morning Buna walked to the pen. He stood nearby. He waited. He watched. And Coda began to notice. At first he would just lift his head. Then, a few days later, he started to wag his tail. After that, he tried to stand up, though his legs were still shaky. One morning, Coda limped to the edge of the pen, pressed his tiny body against the wooden fence, and Buna lowered his head until his trunk hovered just inches away. No words, no sound, just the quiet space between them, filled with something that didn't need to be explained. It wasn't just a friendship. It was something deeper. Like Buna had chosen him, claimed him, loved him, and day by day, it showed more and more. Buna began to roll small fruits toward the fence. Mangoes, marulas, whatever he could find. Coda didn't eat them, but he sniffed them, nibbled, learned. And Buna waited each time, as if he needed to make sure the puppy was interested, safe, curious. When it rained, Buna stood by the pen, using his massive body to block the wind. When it was too hot, he kicked dust gently toward the fence, creating a little shade. The other staff watched with wide eyes. They whispered behind their hands, took photos, recorded videos, but no one interrupted. Because deep down, they knew something special was happening, and it wasn't for humans to explain. It was something between them, a connection being built, one quiet moment at a time. Then, on the 7th day, it changed again. Amara found Koda outside the pen. She froze. He had never left it before. His legs were still weak, his body still fragile. But there he was, curled up next to Buna's front leg, asleep, peaceful. The elephant didn't move, only looked up slowly when Amara approached, and then looked away again, like saying, "Don't worry, he's safe with me." Amara felt tears in her throat. This wasn't just an animal being kind to another. This was something else, something lost, being found again. Buna had lost something long ago. No one knew what exactly. But whatever it was, it had left a hole in him. And somehow, Koda had filled it. Not by doing anything, but simply by being there. Alive, small, needing love. And Buna, for the first time in years, had love to give. Something sacred was building in the silence. And soon, the whole sanctuary would feel it. By the 2nd week, everyone at the sanctuary knew their names. The old elephant who once avoided all connection, and the puppy who had nothing left. Now, they were rarely apart. Buna followed Koda with slow, careful steps wherever the puppy wandered, even if it was just a few feet. And Koda, still unsteady, seemed to grow stronger with each passing day. Not just in body, but in spirit. Something about being near Buna gave him courage. He no longer flinched at loud sounds. He no longer hid when people approached. He didn't even bark. He didn't need to. His whole being seemed to say, "I am safe now." One afternoon, Amara set up a drone to quietly capture the sanctuary from above. She let it fly slowly over the fields, across the trees, until it hovered gently above Buna and Koda. What she saw made her breath catch. Buna was lying down, something he almost never did during the day, and tucked into the curve of his massive front leg was Koda. Sleeping soundly, his small body curled into the shape of a question mark, pressed against Buna's wrinkled skin. At one point, the puppy stirred and began licking gently at the elephant's front leg, right where an old scar ran like a dry river through his skin. It was the scar Buna had carried since the day he lost his herd. The video went viral. Amara posted it quietly, without fanfare, just to show the world something pure. She captioned it simply, "He found his heart again." Within hours, the video spread across platforms. Comments poured in. "This broke me. I didn't know I needed this. Love speaks without words." News stations reached out. Wildlife photographers asked for access. People from around the world began sending donations to the sanctuary. But none of that mattered to Buna, and none of it mattered to Koda, because what they had was untouched by cameras, headlines, or praise. It was something older than all of that, something made of instinct, of wounds, of healing. Buna began to behave in ways no one had ever seen before. He stood at the gate every morning, waiting for the staff to let Koda out. He refused food until the puppy was brought over. He started leading Koda on small walks around the sanctuary, never rushing, always watching. And when Koda stumbled, Buna paused until he caught up. Some days Amara found them both near the water, Buna dipping his trunk gently to splash the puppy, and Koda leaping in excitement, his tail wagging wildly, soaked but joyful. This bond, it wasn't just survival anymore. It was joy. It was companionship. It was family. And as the days passed, that invisible string between them only grew stronger. But the real test, the one no one saw coming, was about to arrive. And it would shake the sanctuary to its core. Love doesn't ask for permission. Sometimes it just shows up and stays. It started with a shift in the wind. The air turned heavy. The leaves stopped moving. Even the birds fell silent. Amara looked up from her notebook. The sky had darkened too quickly, like night was rushing in before its time. A storm was coming, and not just any storm. One of those wild, unpredictable African downpours that could turn the forest floor into a river within minutes. Staff rushed to secure the pens. Tents were tied tighter, water tanks covered. The animals were guided into shelters. Buna stood still under his usual tree, watching the sky. Koda, now strong enough to walk longer distances, was nearby, sniffing the edge of the brush line, curious and distracted. Then the wind hit, hard, tree branches cracked, dust whipped through the air, rain began falling in loud sheets, the kind that erases sound. Amara turned to check on Koda, but he was gone. He wasn't in the shelter. He wasn't in the pen. He wasn't near Buna anymore. Panic hit her chest like ice. She called out, but her voice was swallowed by the storm. And then she saw Buna. His body had stiffened. His ears flared. He let out a low, haunting rumble, deeper than anything she had ever heard from him. He moved, faster than anyone thought he could. Buna began to push through the rain, heading straight into the trees. Trainers tried to follow. They called him back. He didn't stop. He was on a mission. Through mud, branches, and flooded trails, Buna walked deeper into the forest. For the next 36 hours, no one saw him. The sanctuary was soaked, roads were blocked, communication lines were down, and Koda was still missing. Amara didn't sleep. None of the staff did. They searched everywhere. Nothing. By the end of the second night, hope was fading. But then, just after dawn, a staff member screamed from the watchtower. He pointed into the fog, and there, walking slowly through the mist, was Buna. His massive frame was soaked, covered in scratches. Mud caked around his legs. His eyes were tired, and hanging gently from his trunk was something small, something alive. Koda, wet, weak, but breathing. Buna carried him like he was made of glass. Careful, slow, sacred. He walked all the way back to the center of the sanctuary and laid the puppy down in front of Amara's feet. Then, for the first time in 10 years, Buna made a sound no one had ever heard. A deep, trembling cry. Not angry, not wild. It sounded like grief, finally letting go. Amara dropped to her knees. She didn't know where Buna had found him. She didn't know how he had survived. But she knew this. Buna had gone into the storm and brought his child home. He didn't just find the puppy. He found a part of himself. The sanctuary was silent that morning. The storm had passed, but its echo was still in the trees. Branches broken, trails flooded, birds just starting to return. Koda slept wrapped in blankets on Amara's porch, his little chest rising and falling slowly. His paws were scraped, his ear torn, but his heartbeat was steady. His tiny body was safe, and Buna stood close by. He didn't rest. He didn't eat. He simply stood beside the porch, still and unmoving, for 14 hours, as if waiting for permission to breathe again. The staff brought fruit. He ignored it. Other elephants passed. He didn't notice. His eyes were only on one thing, the puppy. And when Koda finally woke, weak but alert, and let out the softest little whine, Buna exhaled, a long, low breath, like his heart had finally unclenched. From that day on, no one questioned their bond. It wasn't cute anymore. It wasn't funny or curious or good for the internet. It was sacred, something unspoken, yet stronger than anything the sanctuary had seen before. Buna now refused to sleep unless Koda was near. He lay down only when Koda curled up beside him. He splashed water toward him to help clean his wounds, using his trunk like a gentle brush. One morning, Amara stepped outside early, just after sunrise, and froze. Koda was standing on Buna's massive foot. The puppy was upright, tail wagging, barking proudly into the trees, and Buna was smiling. It wasn't a human smile. It was something softer, the kind that lives in the eyes, the kind you feel more than see. And for a moment, the world seemed okay. A broken puppy who once shook in fear, an old elephant who once refused to care, now stood together like they had always belonged. No one dared disturb them, because love had chosen its shape, and it looked like this. One morning, a journalist arrived. She had flown across the world just to witness the bond she had seen online. She asked Amara, "How did it happen?" Amara only said, "I think he lost someone, and then he found someone. That was all, and it was everything." Healing doesn't always look loud. Sometimes it stands quiet and watches over you. Weeks passed. The land began to heal. The floodwaters dried. Grass grew again where the storm had left scars. And in the heart of the sanctuary, under the same tree where everything had begun, Buna and Koda remained side by side. Buna walked with a new calm. Not heavy, like before. Lighter. His steps were slower, but peaceful, like someone who had finally found a reason to stay. Koda was stronger now, He ran ahead sometimes, circling Buna's legs like a shadow with a heartbeat. He barked at butterflies. He chased falling leaves. He even tried to sneak food from Buna's feeding trough. And the old elephant led him. Always. Their routine became the rhythm of the sanctuary. At 6 a.m., Koda would sit at the gate and wait for Buna. At 6:05, Buna would arrive and lower his trunk over the fence. They would touch, then begin their morning walk. People came from all over to see them, not because it was cute, but because it was true. One quiet morning, as the sun began to rise in gold and silver above the mopane trees, Amara stood by the fence, sipping her tea. She watched Buna approach from the far side of the field, his ears soft in the breeze. Koda trotted ahead of him, proud and playful, but something felt different. Buna wasn't looking at the puppy. He was looking at her. Amara straightened. The elephant kept coming, step by step, until he stood just inches from the wooden fence where she stood. He didn't stop. He stepped over the gate, something he had never done before. Koda followed behind, and then something happened that no one at the sanctuary would ever forget. Buna lowered his head, lower and lower, until his massive forehead touched Amara's. Softly, deliberately, no movement, just contact. She couldn't breathe. She had worked with animals her entire life, but nothing had ever felt like this. It wasn't random. It wasn't coincidence. It was a message, a thank you, not just for saving Koda, but for saving him, for giving him a second chance to feel, to love, to protect something again. Buna lifted his head slowly, looked at her one last time, then turned and walked back to the tree. Koda stayed behind for a moment, licking her hand, then trotted after his guardian. And the world was quiet again, but not empty. It was full of something so deep, so wordless, it could only be felt. He didn't speak. He didn't need to. He said everything with one gentle touch. Years passed. The trees grew taller. The sanctuary changed. New animals came. Old ones passed. Seasons turned like pages in a quiet book. But one thing remained the same. Every morning, before the sun rose fully over the grasslands, an old elephant and a small black and white dog walked the same path together. Buna was slower now. His steps took more effort. His back curved gently with age, but his eyes never lost their softness. And Koda? He had grown into a strong, alert dog, loyal, watchful, and still, always, at Buna's side. He never wandered far. He never let Buna out of his sight. The staff used to joke that Koda had become the sanctuary's guardian, but those who had been there from the beginning knew the truth. He was Buna's shadow, his child, his second chance. One quiet evening, as the sun dipped low and painted the sky in pink and orange, Amara sat by the old tree. It was the same tree Buna had chosen to stand under that very first day. Now Buna lay beside it, his massive body curled gently around Koda, who rested with his chin on Buna's leg. They didn't move much anymore. They didn't need to. Just being near each other was enough. Amara took a photo. She didn't post it online. This moment wasn't for the world. It was for them. Two souls who had once been broken and had healed, not through medicine, not through science, but through each other. No one knew exactly how many years Buna had left, but one thing was certain. However many he had, he would spend them with Koda. And when his time came, when the forest grew still and the wind carried his last breath through the tall grass, Koda would know, and he would not be alone, because love doesn't end. Not the kind that finds you when you're lost, not the kind that speaks without words, not the kind that chooses you, even when the world has forgotten you. It stays, quietly, forever. Sometimes the family we need doesn't look anything like us, but they know our hearts just the same. And did this story move you as much as it moved us? Tell us below, and let us know where in the world you're watching from. Your words matter, just like theirs did.